Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Oh, Mark, check out that nice new snazzy intro for the 5 Yard Rush Daily Fantasy Sports Show. What do you think of that?
Amazing. As your face, that photo was just designed to go on a dollar bill.
Well, I have put the idea forward rather than Charlie Boy going on the new banknotes when they come out, just to get that picture on there. Even if I'm just on the back, I'll take that. Take that all day.
Yeah, even if you're just on the back, I like that. So.
Yeah, I'd take that. Just put me on the back.
Yeah.
Who is it? Who's on there now? Is it Darwin? I mean, I'd put myself amongst that crowd of people. So,
especially those sunglasses, it's just perfect. Just perfect.
Yeah. Big shout out, Rob from 5 Yard. That is phenomenal, that intro. Thank you very much, my friend.
Thank you very much, Rob.
We are back, Mark. So good evening, Rush Nation. If you're listening to this tomorrow or day after, then good morning, good afternoon. We're back to talk about daily fantasy sport. How did you get on this past week, Mark? I know we didn't do a show last week for reasons outside of our control, but we are back this week. At some point, we'll get Jordan. We'll be on as a trio.
Yeah, this is we're doing week 5, aren't we now? Yeah, so like it'll be probably week 6 by the time we all get on together. Kind of shows how hectic it's been. Yes, I think I tweeted this out. I won $1.10 this week after all those hours and hours. I think so. Slightly working for slightly less than minimum wage. Had poor classic slates, but very good showdown. Basically, what it was for me. What about yourself?
Yeah. In terms of cash, I think I finished the weekend probably somewhere around breaking even. But the cherry on top of the icing, as it were, was I managed to bag myself a couple of tickets playing the college football on Saturday, which was a nice surprise because I know a little bit about the college game. Obviously, the players in that it's a revolving door of players every few years, but it was I managed to finish first in the contest that I was in. I kind of wish I'd have entered a higher stakes contest because it probably would have had a really good chance of cashing quite high, but there we go. It's one of them sports where I probably feel like I don't know enough about it to take those kind of risks. Like I like playing the college game on the Saturday for a little bit of fun and a bit of interest, and the jerseys look sharp as well. So yeah, that was my week. Couple of tickets won, just over break even, I would say. We go again this week, Matt. But one of the 5 Yard boys had a big win in the Ashes contest, did they not?
They did. Dan, who's may pop in tonight, we're not quite sure now, may pop in. Yeah, he won the. I've been posting about the Ashes League. It's got some great contests in there for UK and EU players. I don't know where you can play in the EU, by the way. I must ask Chris Hart at some point about that. But yeah, it's.
I think so.
Yeah, well, Dan won the winner takes all $1,000, didn't he? So. I've actually got his lineup. If you want us to have a quick look at it, or should we wait to see? We'll wait to see. Maybe should we wait to see if he comes on? Shall we?
Yeah, we'll see if he comes
on. Yeah. So yeah, it was. There's another one of those free contests in the Ashes League this week as well. So I recommend people go and listen to that.
I just had a look in the lobby actually before I came on, and there's a couple of free contests going this week. Now, obviously, the other free ones that you'll see in the lobby are the mass entry, but it's free. You might as well. It's quite a big prize pot that's available. I don't think we can enter the alcohol ones over here. So I noticed there was a Guinness contest which I tried to jump on, but anything that like the Amazon Prime have done one the past couple of weeks. Normally, I think theirs is a showdown one, but it's any of the free ones you can jump on. You might as well. As the same Wigan out for note.
I'm laughing because I didn't mean to do this to you, did I, Nick? But with that Amazon one, I gave you the impression that you would have won the Millie Maker.
Oh my
Do you
God!
remember?
That had actually I'd completely erased that from my memory until you've just said
Therapy.
that. Oh my God! Imagine being sat on the couch and sending the team and saying, "Look at this! This lineup cashed, but only a fairly smallish amount." And I should have clicked to it. I should have clocked that lineup, given that it didn't win the Amazon contest, it was never going to win a Millie contest. I should have clocked it at that point. But to then be told that would have gone really close, and then to be told it's the optimal Millie lineup, only for me to bring myself back into earth and point out that the quarterback only scores 1.5 in the Millie, not 2. That was I didn't quite finish as high as I would have liked, but for a second I was a would-be millionaire thanks to Mark. And working out ways. Working out ways of how I could actually tell the missus without basically getting kicked out of the house.
So you can't admit to that stuff. You can't admit that stuff to yourself even and stuff. It's like, that was terrible. Should know the rules more and stuff. Yeah. But back to the Ashes League is a great one for UK players. Just join it. You can enter for free. I don't think you need to make a deposit to play. I don't think it's even like, I think it's free.
Yeah.
So and it's I had how many have it? About 150 people in it last week or something, and it was you get $1,000 for winning it. I mean, that looks
it's winner take all.
Amazing. Yeah, it's amazing value, really.
Yeah, it is. And the thing is, if it's a good contest to test yourself in, especially if you're into the fantasy side of it, because I know that Rich Cooling, who is one half of the Dynasty Boys, he had a good week. He cashed.
He did well.
It just goes to show if you've got that knowledge, you can apply that fantasy knowledge to DFS, and surprise, surprise, it works.
Yeah, indeed. Talking of our week, Jack's comment there. I'm here only for the Padel content.
I'm glad you pointed that out because I've been racking my brains. Is it Padel? Is it Padel? Is it Paddle? How is it pronounced? And what on earth is it?
People seem to be assuming because I've done it once, I know everything about it. It's like I called it Padel, but I haven't got a clue. It's if anybody doesn't know, it's like tennis in a squash court, and it's tennis balls, and you don't use tennis rackets. You use these paddles. They're sort of foamy, and it's quite easy. Not easy. It's definitely easier than tennis. The ball just doesn't go flying off in random directions like in tennis if you hit it too well. And it was a lot of fun. Lots of fun.
It's like a bit of a foam ball.
No, the ball is a tennis ball.
Right.
But the rackets, the paddles are foamy, so you can't hit them so hard. So it's a lot of fun, and the ball sort of bounces off the walls and stuff and things like that. So lots of fun. So there you go. You can't play DFS
yet. It does sound like your kind of game, Mark, from what you've told me. So I'm glad you found a new love.
Doesn't involve much running around, you mean? And like the ball keeps coming back to you. What were we saying about my dodgy knees the other day on the WhatsApp?
I join you there. Mine aren't too, but either. Showdown then, Mark. Let's talk Thursday.
Do you want me to share a screen? Should I share a screen? I can do that.
Why not?
I've got it all ready to go. Not that one.
You would think at this stage in our podcasting careers that we'd have this kind of thing ready and waiting, but we still don't. Week in, week out, we still don't have
it. There you go. You can see that, can't you? It's good.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the only thing that's stopping us getting signed by the big boys.
Yeah,
The only thing.
Merely just lacking professionalism, I think it is.
Yeah, that's all it is.
Talk me through your thoughts this week, Mark, for Thursday night showdown between the Colts and the Broncos at Mile High.
My thoughts are I'm not expecting masses of points. Both defenses are actually pretty good in terms of not giving away fantasy points as well. I think Melvin Gordon's going to be the highest owned player, don't we think? Potentially. And I've just learned from Jack, who's watching the show, that I forgot how do you pronounce his name? The running back has just been activated.
Is it Ozigbo? Is it?
Ozigbo, yeah, he's just been activated. So Latavius Murray, who's been getting a lot of steam on Twitter, isn't playing tonight. But other than that, I'm not really sure. On Denver side, you don't know what's happening in the running game. I think on the Indy side, will Pittman get sort of covered out the game by Patrick Surtain? That's kind of those are my questions, really, more than thoughts.
Yeah, I think Gordon will be highly owned, and I think Heinz will be likely quite highly owned as well, because he's got a clear path to volume this week with Jonathan Taylor obviously being injured. But neither team is all that convincing in this early stages of the season. Both have had some wins. Denver are not putting up a massive amount of points even in victory. So you've had lows of 16 against the Seahawks, 16 against the Texans, 11 against the 49ers. So defense dragging him over the line in that one. But the Colts haven't exactly been spectacular either. Jonathan Taylor's been largely neutralized. The offensive line doesn't seem to be getting the push off that it was last year. Pittman obviously had a game where he was absent. Matt Ryan looks like he's aged about 6 years since moving to the Colts, which maybe it's just the Colts quarterback thing, because it seemed like the same happened with Wentz last year as well. But it's just like Jack's just said, why do they do it to us on a Thursday? It's just not really an appealing game. It feels like the kind of game where if you're going to take some risks, you can throw in the defenses, you can throw in the kickers, especially at Mile High. It's an ideal stadium to be kicking in.
Yeah, I think that's a good shout. We've seen, I've noticed a fair few winning lineups, not necessarily generally optimal, but not always, having kicker and defense for a winning team in it. And so I think I'm certainly expecting the Broncos to win, but it's two bad teams really and stuff. If I had a lot of lineups, I would definitely be building though for like Indy to win quite convincingly as well, because you could just easily see it happening. If you're building one lineup, I think we're probably both of a similar mind here. We'd be building for a Denver win. Yeah,
and I think of the two sets, the Indy guys will probably be the lower end of the two. In fact, they will be the lower end of the two, because despite the struggles, the offensive weapons that Denver have got at their disposal at the moment are better than what there is on the other side of the field. So I think if you're going to try and go against the grain, I think you play Indianapolis assets and hope that they do eke out the win. I think it'll be a low scorer. I don't think it'll be one for the purists or the casual fan, for that matter.
Yeah.
And I think if you are going to play defenses, kickers, maybe target a tight end, as I think Indianapolis are fairly poor against tight ends this season so far. I think if you are going to play players like that, you can pretty much put whoever you want in the rest of the lineup. I think for me, Sutton is probably the safest option of the lot from what we've seen in this early stage of the season. He seems to be getting consistent volume. Jerry Jeudy is a little bit like that, but that could be a good DFS play, in fairness, this evening. So yeah, it's not a great game, this one. I'm still a little bit on the fence of how I'm going to build my lineup tonight. But as it stands at the moment, I've got Sutton in the captain slot, and then just a mix of kickers, defense, and Russell Wilson sprinkled in there as well.
Yeah, I'm currently, as Jack pointed out, Gano was optimal captain last week on Monday. This really does feel like it could be another kicker or DST optimal night, doesn't it? But because there's so many questions and stuff, and it's so hard to find, I use the word safe plays. There's no such thing as a safe play, but it's my lineup's changed a lot today. I'm only playing the one lineup tonight. It's changed a lot today. At the moment, Joey Judy's in my captain spot. But that's it. Here's a question from Daniel Lawrence. If you had to pick between Gordon and Heinz tonight, I mean, we had a discussion about this earlier, didn't we? With Jack Humphrey, running backs might not be the best play at all tonight.
Yeah, I think my personal preference of the two would probably be Heinz, simply because even when Taylor's been on the field, Heinz still gets targets, and because there isn't much at receiver for Indianapolis. Heinz has often been operated in the receiver core, so I think he has the clearest path to workload this evening. I think with Gordon, he's had his struggles, obviously the fumble last week. Mike Boone's been talked about quite a bit this week. The fact that they've elevated another running back off the practice squad suggests to me that it's going to still be a bit of a committee there in Denver. Very unfortunate for Javonte Williams being out for the season. But yeah, I'm still not sold by Gordon. I don't know if he looks like he's lost a bit of a step. You could argue that he was still quite efficient last year, but he looks like he's struggling a bit this year. And I wouldn't be surprised if you're going to play Gordon, you might as well play Mike Boone and have a punt there instead.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Heinz is we've had slightly false dawns with him before, where he's, JT's been out and but he doesn't end up taking this massive workload particularly. So it's quite good. It's just something to bear in mind. What was next? Also thinking about draft as well with that question as much as showdown. I wish we knew this question was coming. To think about an answer to that one a bit better. Yeah, I'm sorry, Daddy. I couldn't offer anything more than I've already offered, really.
Yeah, no, fair. Yeah, I still say Heinz. I still say if you're looking at who has the clearest path to volume, and he might not get it because Indianapolis might be chasing the game, but even if that is the case, little dump offs and screens to Heinz, we've seen it happen before. The thing is with Heinz is he's one of them kind of players who he doesn't need a massive yardage day, but you could have a couple of goal line screens or goal line targets, and he could run in a couple of touchdowns and have 30 rushing yards and 40 receiving yards, quite possibly.
Yeah, it's kind of the sort of way we talk. It kind of sums up this game, really, doesn't it, as a whole? There's a lot of maybe plays in there, but as I say, nothing that you feel really confident about.
Lot of maybe nots as well.
Yeah, maybe nots. Yeah.
But
play Heinz scored 2, don't he? Goes to, but he pretty much sums it up. But I don't think he's going to go Newcastle personally.
No, both teams I feel very much cancel each other out in this game because both have a good run defense. Both have pretty good defense against receivers. Indianapolis are poor when it comes to tight end coverage. It looks like a defense night for me, a defense and a kicker night. I think that's the route I'll be going.
So it'll be 35-31 now. Now we've said that.
Yeah, it will. It will. 700 passing yards total. 200 rushing yards total.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
We'll move
Cool.
on then from the dull Thursday evening game that we have. I don't think Dan Hughes is going to be joining us by the looks of things, Mark. So let's just have a look at his winning lineup from last week. Let's see.
Okay, let me get that
winning lineup looks like.
Yeah. There we go. You see that? Okay.
Yes.
There you go. So he had the Seattle-Detroit stack. He had a full-on game onslaught, really, didn't he? Like 3 Seattle, 2 Detroits. And he had the important pieces.
I see the logic there. See the logic. I had Smith and I had Metcalf. I didn't have TJ Hawkinson. I know if I would have had TJ Hawkinson, I'd have got a mouthful from you. Because I know you're not his biggest fan. But
he always does this. He always does this. He does this every now and again. You know, score a load of points, but he's not very consistent. But we'll get onto that later.
That game, there's a number of players you could have picked. Really, I mean, he's got Hawkinson. He's also thrown in Jamal Williams, but Rashad Penny had a fantastic game as well. Lockett didn't, from memory. Lockett was non-existent basically.
Yeah, he didn't. By the way, Dan didn't need to do any of this because he was so far ahead of everybody all night. I was kind of watching it as it went along, and he was just always 20, 25 points ahead of everybody. So yeah, it's interesting. If you can't make it today, maybe we'll come on some other point. It'd be interesting to know why he game onslaughted that one though, because it's a very high variance strategy, you know. If you do that, you pick 5 players from a game and it's a 28-24 game, you're not going to win anything. So
yeah. I had the stack I had was Smith and Metcalf. Simply because I think Smith seems to be settling into his role as Seattle's gunslinger now, and Detroit's defense has shown me nothing really thus far this year. They keep games close, but the almost every game seems to be a shootout with them at the moment. But
and I think we might end up. Yeah, sorry.
No, fair play. He's thrown in Eckler there. Eckler's had his struggles early on. There was bound to be a game where that turned around. It doesn't take a genius to call that one out. CD Lamb, again, he seems to be Cooper Rush. I think him and Cooper Rush didn't seem like they had much chemistry when he first came in, but the last couple of games, filling in for Dak, he seems to be looking for CD Lamb a little bit more. What's impressive is he's cashed this lineup. He's finished first, and he's ended up with a couple of snowflakes with Drake London doing next to nothing, and Kenneth Walker doing next to nothing as well. And that's a brave stack. Obviously, he's gone with Kenneth Walker there, but Rashad Penny was the majority back during that game. Yeah. So I don't know if he's done that as a bit of a leverage kind of thing, but he's come first with
yeah. Could just be money. It's like it's like the Eckler thing sort of came out of nowhere a little bit for me in terms of the way my process goes through and stuff. I definitely missed on that, but I was kind of surprised how popular Penny was as well. Generally speaking, he was like 30% in a lot of stuff, and I was a bit surprised about that. So yeah, it's a great lineup. It won $1,000, so you can't go wrong, can you? It's well, fair play to Dan for that.
Yeah, prime example as well of taking some chances. That lineup could very well have finished last week, but it didn't. Finish first, and we always say that when building the lineup, build it with that in mind, that there is a very high ceiling to the lineup, but if it doesn't go your way, expect that you'll be well out the cash and probably towards the back of the field.
This is actually what I wanted to talk about in the strategy section this week, but just to relate to that, I did a tweet earlier in the week with a clip from a Roto Grinders pre-game DFS show where James McCall and Jordan Cooper were talking about stacking. and game onslaughts as well, specifically, because they were asked the question on the show. And he made the great point that if you, for example, you have a set of 20 lineups, maybe 2 or 3 of them should be game onslaught lineups every week, and 2 or 3 of them should have barely any correlation in them at all. That they're 2 extremes. Obviously, with the game onslaught lineups, you need to be lucky enough to choose the right game, and then the ones which don't have any correlation in them are for like those weeks where it's generally a bit lower scoring in fantasy points wise. And then those are the sort of weeks where you see at the top of the mini maker what we would term a random lineup, which is a bit insulting to the person who created it, but it has no obvious stacking or correlation and stuff. And those 2 things, they were saying, kind of, if you're building a portfolio lineups, you should represent both of those things in sort of the same percentage as they happen, as it were. So it seems so obvious afterwards, but if I build a set of lineups, I almost always build them with a similar structure in that respect. And I don't sort of necessarily vary them to that degree. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, in that instance there where Dan's targeted that specific game, and I would have thought that of the games to target, I think Jamal Williams probably would have been highly owned across a slate, but then you probably wouldn't have had high ownership on the likes of Geno Smith or TJ Hawkinson, for example. Its ownership might have been a little bit higher, to be fair, because Goff didn't really have much else to throw at last week. But I think if you'd have played a lineup with like a contingency like Dan has there for players from that game, that would have been probably one of the lower owned games, I would have thought, from some of the ones that were on the slate, simply because of the injuries that Detroit have had. Seattle have had some struggles. They've been in low scoring games. It's not, Seattle versus Detroit's not really an appealing game on paper. It's not quite as bad as tonight's game, but I think it's a good strategy, definitely. And I always think this with the random lineups as well, that a random lineup has as much chance to hit as a lineup that has stacking correlation in it. It's at the end of the day, it is a sport. It is random, and we have no control over what happens. You can do all the research you want and put all the strategy into it you want, but if someone stacks a lineup of random players that go off, it's going to be very hard to beat that lineup. So I've always thought that. I completely understand the strategy behind stacking and correlation, but I do like the idea of throwing in a couple of random lineups as well, just of players that you think might have a ceiling week.
Yeah, it's funny that you were saying how unsmooth you were with the screen sharing and all that. You've kind of almost perfectly segued into what I wanted to talk about strategy-wise, and we haven't discussed that in advance at all.
We haven't.
One thing which it's always like brilliant.
This is. Do you know what, Mike? You mentioned about the strategy before the pod, and this needs its own weekly segment of Mark's strategizing. I feel like exclamation mark. That is what we'll call it, and the floor is yours.
So this week, what I was talking about was actually roster construction, because you don't see masses of content created about this aspect of creating DFS lineups, and I've seen on a couple of the 1 week season guys, and also sort of some of the roto grinder stuff with Jordan Cooper has been talking about this season. I've been sort of analysing it myself. The basic idea is, and last week was a perfect week, a lot of people were playing lineups of very similar construction. That construction being either Allen or Lamar as a quarterback, Jamal Williams and Khalil Herbert or Rashad Penny or James Robinson as running back, Stephon Diggs as a expensive, if you're with Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, Stephon Diggs as part of that correlation. And then they were forced to play, I think it was Josh Reynolds or somebody at 3.1 million on Detroit or something like that because of the money and stuff. So what the long and short of it was, there was like 6 or 7 players where lots of teams in the large field tournaments and the small field as well had a combination of 4, 5 or 6 of them, if you see what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And because So there's two things to that. One, you know that if you're going to beat 200,000 people, you can't be playing many of those combination of players. You know, this is almost like a stacking or a correlation, which isn't game related, if you see what I mean. Because if you play like Josh Allen and and Mark Andrews and Stephon Diggs, you almost had to play Josh Reynolds, if you see what I mean. So
Yeah.
if you're trying to beat a lot of people, you can't be playing, you know, more than say two of that combination of players. But the other aspect of it is it tells you how people are generally spending their money in your lineups. So in this case, it was high price back, two mid price running backs, high price wide receiver, 2 or 3 low price wide receivers, and possibly a high priced tight end. But once you know that, it allows you to be slightly different. As in, you can say, well, look, I'm going to start my lineup by saying I'm not going to play 1 high price receiver and 2 low ones. I'm going to play 3 middle ones. And as soon as you do that, you're making yourself different enough from the field that you're giving yourself more of a chance to go past them. And once you just make that one little decision, that one little difference for starting, the rest of your lineup, you just build it however you want to. If you want to stack, you want to stack. If you want to play the most chalkiest players everywhere else, play the most chalkiest players. It doesn't matter because you haven't got that chalky combination or that chalky core of players in there. And last week it was very easy, I thought, to spot it. And generally it worked. It was as I was predicting. If we'd done the show last week, I would have done this then. I got Mark Andrews was the lower end I thought he would be. But yeah, that was the basic concept. And the reason that's important, I think it's important, is one thing which doesn't matter, like you said, Nick, you can play DFS in any way you want to, entirely up to you. But one thing which is always common is you're trying to beat all the other players in the DFS contest. That's what you're actually trying to do. And you're not going to do that by playing all the same players. It just doesn't happen.
Very well put. Very well put. And quite thought-provoking, really, because there's often, prior to just coming on the show, as a matter of fact, I always try and start my lineups by going QB, RB, wide receiver, tight end, and then filling the rest of the gaps in. But often I find myself after those 4 either quite happy with what I've got left over or not very happy with what I've got left over. And just as I was coming on, I started building a lineup, and it got to a point where I always keep an eye on your sort of average budget of what you've got left, because I know then if I'm looking at that, if I go a little bit below average, I can go above average somewhere else. And I started building this lineup, and I was like, do you know what? I'm just going to look at players that are around that average budget, $100 or $200 either side of it, and just build the rest of the lineup around the average budget, because I've got the core in that I want. But then throwing in the rest of that, I'm not paying up somewhere to then pay down elsewhere. I'm just going fairly balanced across the rest of the lineup. And then I looked at the lineup and I was like, I quite like that. And I feel like it would be a quite unique lineup, because I didn't really try and target high end anywhere. I didn't really try and take a punt on a specific position. It was just quite balanced and solid across its core, which meant omitting some of the better players, some of the chalk. But on the whole, I looked at it and I thought, do you know what? I like that lineup, and it's different. I don't think it would have been duplicated because it was just very average across the core, but it was average in a way that if the players perform that week, there's a very good chance they're going to score, a good number of points. So, yeah, it's interesting how people do play this game differently.
Yeah. The thing about the duplication, though, the point is it can still be unique, but you can still be making things harder for yourself, if you see what I mean. Because you could still have 4 or 5 of the chalky core players in there, and your lineup could be unique. But because you've got 4 or 5 of the chalky ones, the only way to get away from everybody else is to be almost perfect with the rest of your plays. And also other people who choose who have 4 or 5 of the chalky cores, they're spending their money in exactly the same places, just not with the whole of the core. So if they, for example, didn't play Jamal Williams and Khalil Herbert, maybe they're playing James Robinson and I don't know, Rashad Penny or something. I can't remember exact prices from last week. That doesn't make it that much different, if you see what I mean. It's so the way I think about it, I'm trying to put it into a metaphor. This is the best I can come up with, the running track metaphor. If you imagine 99 people step onto a running track, they turn left, they start running. They're going clockwise, okay? You yourself, you step onto the running track, you do exactly the same as them, you turn left, you start running, and you end up going anti-clockwise. How have you done that? And the reason is the 99 people are stepping on from the outside of the track, you are stepping on from the inside of the track. You've done exactly the same as everybody else. You haven't been that crazy or contrary or weird. All you've done is start from a slightly different position, and you've ended up going the opposite way. And for me, I think that's a great way, especially for people who are doing this on a more casual basis, just a great way to sort of just get somewhere different, make it just a little bit easier to beat the field.
What thought-provoking wisdom, Mark.
Honestly, I've had weeks of it because I haven't done anything for weeks.
I was picturing the running track in my head, and I was like, when you said turn left and then they run clockwise, I was like, in my head they were running anti-clockwise at that point
because they came on the inside.
Yeah. So,
in your head, okay. In my head, they go off the outside.
Just a different, but it's just a different viewpoint. But really good analogy. Brings us nicely on to this weekend slate, I guess, on Sunday.
Yeah, we should probably talk about that at some point. We're almost 40
we probably should.
Yeah. About it. Do you want me to get that up?
Yes. Dan, while you're getting that up, Danny said, would another way to go be leaving a bit of cash? Doing that alone would make you different than most, as normally people surely spend all their budget. That is absolutely, and you've just as an example there, Danny, spent 49,500 on each team. That is absolutely a way to be different. We say, no matter what sport we've covered in DFS, whether it be NFL, golf, I feel like we've covered a plethora of sport. But we always say, MLB, we always say if you've got money in the bank, it's not a bad thing. Like we were talking about the showdown lineup earlier in the group chat, and I still had over 1,000 left over, but that's absolutely fine because when you look at some of the other players, if you've picked a player, you've picked them for a reason. The actual budget that you've got left over can cloud that reasoning because you see that budget and you think that has to be spent. So you then go looking for ways to upgrade your team. By doing so, you're essentially ignoring your own process because you're letting the budget override your thought process in terms of picking your lineup. Pick your players based on not the value, pick them based on who you feel is going to do well. And if it means that you leave 500, 600, 700, over 1,000 on the table, automatically you will be different because I think in DFS, naturally, people do try, especially casual players, do try and spend as much of the budget as they can because it's there. And it sometimes feels nice upgrading at running back, for example. I mean, I've not looked at the prices this week, but you might have enough to go from, say, a Najee Harris to Dalvin Cook, for example, which is about 800 left over. If you're left with 800, you might think, oh, do you know what? Dalvin Cook's the better player, and arguably he is this week. But if your process led you to Najee Harris, play him. If the money's there in the bank left over and you feel that you've got the players you want, go with that.
Yep. As you say, Nick, there are many ways to play this game.
Indeed, and I think if you've got the money left over, one way to maybe get a little bit different, and we hate talking about it, Mark, but maybe pay up at defense because you might just hit on a defense. Yeah, you might just hit on a defense that week where they score 15, 16 points. That'll make you different alone because a lot of people tend to pay down at that position.
Yeah. The other thing is great for the defense. The trick for the defense is if you're in small field, like a hundo or something like that, or one of the 500-man ones. Ownership gets condensed. So, for example, if last week Jamal Williams was predicted to be 30% in a GPP, in a single entry of like 100 or 5,000 or something, he's probably going to be 70 or 80% owned, because that's how these single entries go. Lots of people put their cash lineups in and stuff. So, that one stepping onto the running track thing I was talking about in a single entry tournament, paying for, say, the most expensive defense may well be all you need to do, and then you build your lineup as you would do normally, because the fact you've spent the money there in a very different way to everybody else is spending their money automatically makes you different enough. And then after that, you stack as you want to. You choose the highest projected players, whatever it may be that you want, however you want to do it, doesn't matter. You've done enough to create some leverage by playing the most expensive defense,
Yeah.
So
and
that's
defenses
just another example.
And they're so erratic in the scoring week to week, but you only need to hit on that for 1 week, and it could set you apart from the crowd. If you've paid up for the Eagles defense in week 3 or week 4, you're laughing because they scored 18 points followed by 15 points. They will have been at the more expensive end of the spectrum, but if you've got the budget there and you're quite happy with the rest of your lineup, maybe put it into the defense, because you never know, you might just hit on one of the high scoring defenses that week and it will make you different.
Yeah, that's what I tend to do.
Yeah. Let's talk quarterbacks then, Mark, for this Sunday's slate. So obviously we're covering the 6:00 games here and the 9:05 or 9:25 start times for UK. Obviously different in America, midday, late afternoon. I've seen a lot of traction on social media around Tom Brady's price this week.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of Trevor Lawrence love. Where are your eyes this week?
Well, Tom Brady, there's reports about he's got some injuries, but he doesn't really miss games, does he, with injuries in practice and stuff?
A broken heart, I think, is his
injury
broken this
heart,
week.
Yeah. It's like, don't get me going about Zach Wilson. Jordan, who sadly isn't here because he was literally flying home today and it just hasn't worked out for him, really wanted us to mention Trevor Lawrence and stacking him with Christian Kirk. And I'm assuming it's because they're playing Houston and that's kind of all we need in analysis of that. But yeah, he's that's who Jordan would have been picking today. I was really struggling to come up with a quarterback I really like, other than the obvious sort of Allen and Hurts. Don't really want to talk about them because I think my quarterback's going to be led by my receivers as much as anything this week. Fitting in a quarterback who stacks with your receiver and you can afford. He might even be rather than usually the last player I put into my single entry lineups today this week.
Yeah,
which is very unusual for me.
I think there's definitely potential for a bounce back there from Trevor Lawrence this week, but that Houston's defense is sneaky good. It is a little bit under the radar that I think quarterbacks haven't had a massive amount of success against them this year. Tom Brady, his price this week is very appealing, and he looked like the Brady of old against Kansas City in what was a little bit of a shootout between Tampa Bay and the Chiefs this past week.
He's got all his weapons back really as well now, hasn't he?
He has, yeah. Mike Evans went nuclear. I don't really like what I'm seeing from the quarterback position this week. Again, like Geno Smith's price low again at 5.5. Coming up against New Orleans, it's a fairly stout defense. Kirk Cousins had his struggles in London against them, but I don't really like what I'm seeing from New Orleans on the offensive side, if I'm being honest. The Miami and New York Jets game has the potential to be a high scorer, I think. Miami are a little bit banged up, and the Jets do give up a lot of points to quarterbacks, albeit it is Teddy Bridgewater this week. But I think a week further on in the offense, not being thrown into a game midway through, I think he's shown enough in his NFL career, when he was at Carolina, for example, that he is a fairly competent quarterback. And Jalen Waddle, I believe, still isn't. I don't think he practiced yesterday. I'm not sure if the reports will come out today, but he's got quite a good supporting cast there in Tyreek Hill. And I know Jasicki's not had a fantastic year so far, not been massively involved, but if Waddle's good to go and they've got some running backs there that can really make up ground in Mostert and Edmonds, I think Teddy Bridgewater could be a good play. Alternatively, if you want to play one of the Jets quarterbacks, whoever's going to be playing, I think that's a good play as well this week and a cheap play. I know you're not a big Zach Wilson fan though, Mark.
Well, I mean, that my lack of fandom's got nothing to do with the play on the field. But and also there's really great ways to stack that game, and it's a really easy game to stack both sides as well. So yeah, I can see that. It's like last week's Seattle-Detroit game, the 48-45, those games aren't happening every week, and they definitely don't. But I kind of have I hate to use the word feeling, but if there's a game I thought could be that surprise game, it could well be the Miami-New York Jets game.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I just quarterback just feels it's weird slate with weird pricing anyway, but quarterback in particular feels awkward, doesn't it, this week?
It feels like when you look at who we've got to work with, it feels a little bit like it doesn't feel like a pay up at quarterback kind of week, unless you may be going down the route of Jalen Hurts, or Josh Allen. To be fair, he's playing Pittsburgh, but I don't.
They don't sit on their leads and stuff. Buffalo, they will score points after points after points.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of people will gravitate them just as much as anything because they just don't know who to go with. So I mean, same way as we're talking. I mean, I'd expect Josh Allen to be the most popular quarterback by far, or Tom Brady because of his price. It's not as clear cut as it has been. Let's put it that way.
No, not one of the better weeks, I don't think, for quarterbacks.
No,
I think I'll be paying down at the position this week.
Yeah.
Let's get to them running backs.
Do you see who Jordan picked for running backs this week? Jordan was going to talk about Damien Harris.
I like that, but I think I feel like I prefer Ramondre Stevenson a little bit more. He's almost logging a similar amount of rushing attempts in the last couple of weeks, but he's seeing the receiving work that Harris doesn't seem to be. So I think of the two, I think you're going to get a split backfield here in New England going forward. But I think I prefer Stevenson just this week. You arguably could play both.
Yeah.
Against Detroit.
Yeah. I was wondering about that. I would think that would be a small field kind of play rather than the milli maker, wouldn't you think? Because you need every player to score like 20, 25 points really, especially in these positions.
Yeah.
Could they both get it? But they could very feasibly both get between 15 and 18 points at a very good price, which you can then spend elsewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree. The matchup's ideal for them because Detroit they've given up 8 rushing touchdowns now to running backs. It's like the third most points against running backs. I think I'm not convinced with what New England have got in the receivers still, despite the addition of Parker, who I'm not that high in anyway, but New England's quarterback as well, I think, will cause them to run the ball a little bit more. So
Yeah.
I actually don't mind either of those. If you want to pick either or both, I don't mind that.
Yeah. I'm interested in going back to James Robinson this week. Really, just simply against Houston. Do we need to say much more than that? They give up the most fantasy points to the running back position, and I'm kind of hoping, after getting a little bit of early season steam, that his ownership gets a little bit suppressed because of Travis Etienne getting a bit more work last week. But this week, you could see them easily going out to a lead and just running it down the throats, as they did, when they've taken the lead before.
Yeah.
So
I was just looking for ETN then, and he's priced quite a bit cheaper than Robinson this week, isn't he?
Yeah, you have to go down quite a bit.
I do like the Robinson pick though. Yeah, I like that a lot. I think this week, sort of top end, I think Dalvin Cook on Nick Chubb are standing out for me at the top end, but I don't know, given the price, I think I'd probably rather throw in someone like Harris or Stevenson and Robinson and pay up once again at receiver, looking at some of the prices there this week. My worry with Dalvin Cook is that Mattison is still seeing carries there, and actually in London, Mattison was seeing some of the goal line work, which is always a concern when you're paying up at running back. That's not what you want to see. I wish these Rams running backs would pull the fingers out, to be honest, because they're very cheap every week, but there's absolutely no momentum on the ground at all. Joined in the comments, Mark, by FPL, who had a fantastic win this week. Congratulations.
Yes.
Very well done.
Well done. Old NFL DFS Finn going forwards. We all wish.
Bin the FPL. In the FPL, get DFS.
Yeah.
Instead.
Yeah, it's so uncool, FPL. This is coming from me, which therefore it means nothing. I think everybody will wish the Rams running backs will sort themselves out for fantasy wise and stuff. I mean, you obviously have another interest for them to sort themselves out, but it seemed it's just become so murky. It's so murky.
Another one that you'd like to play with some kind of confidence this week, given his price, is Alvin Kamara at 6'6". But again, we've seen nothing really from him this year, and that's in the games where Winston's been at quarterback as well. This New Orleans offense just it's not big. It doesn't seem like it has like sort of big playability like it has had in previous years. Not from running back, at least. I know Olave had some nice plays last week, but Kamara's another one. I'd love to play him at the price. And to be fair, because of the slow start, he's had that drive his ownership down a little bit. And Seattle have been very poor against the run so far. So that might be a play. Obviously, I've had the question mark over his status going into this week, but he has logged a limited practice on Wednesday, so that'll be one to monitor, I think, as well.
He says he's playing. He's told everybody he is playing. The one that surprised me really this is a little bit. It's been Miles Sanders and the amount of rushes he's been getting. It's kind of
I was as well.
Yeah, finally getting some RB1 usage and stuff after years and years of sort of promising and showing some flashes, and again a decent price. There's I have to sort of see what ownership figures are projected to be here, but there's quite a few options here. Devin Singletary as well. He kind of has taken over a little bit in terms of as the main back, definitely snaps wise and stuff, coming up against generally a weak team. So there's lots of options in here. But Damien Pierce did last week and stuff. With that 75-yard touchdown as well. And look, he had 18 points
Yeah.
and then 28 points. So again, lots of options around there. The fact there are so many options there may well mean that players at the top here I would go a little bit overlooked. And Dalvin Cook and Nick Chubb do look like two great. Actually, so does Eckler as well. I know you don't usually like to stack two running backs from the same game, but Eckler is almost like a receiver anyway, and so definitely feel more comfortable with RB options and quarterback options. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I think if there was a game where you could do that, I think you can make the case that would be an ideal game to do it, because Nick Chubb gets volume regardless of the way that the game's going, and like you said, Eckler is so versatile in how he's used. He could get 6-7 targets and get 15 to 20 rushes. He's a real weapon when they use him correctly, which they did do this past week. Why he wasn't getting goal line touches early on in the season, I will never know. But that's for the Chargers. We move on to wide receiver, Mark.
Indeed. Oh, just a quick mention: Breece Hall offers great value for targets. Of the Jets. Sorry, just a quick one. We'll move to wide receiver.
See, just with Breece Hall, he just seems to be eking out the majority role in the New York backfield as well. It was murky water early on, but I feel like the last couple of weeks you've seen that uptick in his, certainly against Pittsburgh, he's upticking the usage there. So wouldn't surprise me if that does continue and he does become the 65-35 back in New York, if you want to call it that. And
at 5'4", that's a really good price.
Yeah, very good.
Okay. Let's have a look and see who Jordan was going for wide receiver. CD Lamb, who I think literally I saw like a minute before he started, may well be on the injury report now.
He is.
Didn't practice due
to a groin injury. Oof.
Yeah.
Well, that's music to my ears, because we've been getting absolutely torched in the secondary. And I wasn't really looking forward to CD Lamb this week.
And just to add to it, Jack says that Tyreek Hill's now on the injury report as well. So there you go. I've literally brought CD Lamb, I think, into my fan team season-long team just before we came on air.
That's not good.
What do we say about doing that at the last minute? Anyway, CD Lamb's been getting targets, as you just alluded to, which is presumably why. Yeah, he's got the fourth most targets at wide receiver position, presumably why Jordan was going to play him.
Yeah.
For me, my play was Garrett Wilson of the Jets. I can't believe I'm talking about so many Jets. It's funny, isn't it, how this is the Jets offense is suddenly great. It's great for fantasy, but yeah, this is purely a target volume sort of play. He's had 39 targets this year. That puts him at seventh, I think, amongst wide receivers, but he's 5,200, and he is, I think, the highest. Let's check. Yeah, if you look at it, targets per million on DraftKings, he's by far the highest. Yeah. He's at 8, 14, 11, and 6. So yeah, I really like him at that price. There's loads of good options around there. Curtis Samuel, Chris Olave, they're 5'8" and 5'7" as well. So yeah, but I do like Wilson at 5'2". He really offers, that's for the seventh most targets. That's fantastic price.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that, and the consistency's there with him as well. A little bit pricier, but I really like Amari Cooper this week. There is a staggering trend of Amari Cooper's fantasy, if you want to call it that, fantasy output or product. What I'm trying to say is he is much more productive when he's at home than he is on the road. There's no way to sugarcoat it. you look at his 2 games he's played this year, his fantasy average is 3.3 on the road, and it's 27.1 when they play in Cleveland. And you can historically look back at Amari Cooper's career, both in Dallas and in Oakland, now the Las Vegas Raiders, and he's not a fantastic on-the-road receiver. He's very good on home turf, but staggeringly, his performances away from home never match up to it. And I don't know why that is, because playing in Oakland and playing in Dallas are 2 completely different scenarios and completely different quarterbacks that were throwing in the ball. But I can't ignore that home form, the targets that he's getting. I mean, there isn't really much else to throw at in Cleveland. And Njoku has been a nice little surprise at tight end this year. Outside of that, in the receivers, who are we talking? We've got Donovan Peoples-Jones, who looks like he's always got a big play in him, but far too inconsistent. There's really not much else in the receiving game. So I think in terms of volume, that's absolutely going to be there. They've got the Chargers in town. This could be a high scorer. And I mean, Chargers against wide receivers this year, giving up 6 touchdowns, 646 yards through 4 games. I like it. Amari Cooper at 6K. He was in my average price team that I built. Amari Cooper was in there.
I think also he's a really good play, sort of leverage play of Nick Chubb, if you're not going to play the whole stack. They're in the top 10, I think, of giving up fantasy points as well. The Chargers, the wide receiver position as well. So, I think if you don't, because I don't know if you want to really stack with Brissett, but and
absolutely not.
You don't necessarily have to have a Herbo stack either to play him. Say, play Cooper opposite, say, Eckler or something like that, or Mike Williams. Have a mini stack with them. But yeah, I think I do like that play actually. It's got me thinking I need to change some stuff up.
When you're doing that research, Mark, have a look at Amari Cooper's road performance versus home performance. It's crazy. It is crazy.
Yeah.
Every season.
Yeah, this obviously 4 weeks isn't really necessarily showing us everything, but like you say, it's carried on previously as well, or it went on previously in different places as well. It just doesn't make any sense. It's almost as if like, if he has to travel too far to a game, that puts him off.
Jet lag.
Maybe it's jet lag. Maybe it's jet lag.
3-hour plane flight.
I love the narrative on that as well. When you're in the million with your random lineup and stuff, why did you play Amari Cooper? Jet lag factor.
He's at home. Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
he's at home. Yeah, he's at home. That's all you need, isn't it? It's like, I mean, just a quick shout out. I just think you have to play Cooper Cup. I know he's cost a lot of money, but he's so good. And every defense knows he's going to get targeted 15 times a game, but it still happens. It still happens.
Yeah. He's one of the few receivers in the league. I think there's 4 or 5 receivers in the league where even when they're covered, they're not covered. And he's one of them. I would probably put, Diggs in that category, for example. When you think he's covered, he's still open. And Cooper Cup is another one in that category. I think 9,600. Have we seen him at this price yet this season? I feel like we have. 9,900 twice against lesser opposition. 9,600. I mean, playing. There's nothing much else going on in that Rams offense at the moment. Tyler Higbee is having a decent season. It's either Higbee or Cup. There's nothing really coming from the running backs. And Dallas poses a tough test this week. I think we are going to have to throw the ball a little bit. Dare I say, there could be points where we might even be playing from behind. So, Cooper Cup, I think, like you said, he's expensive, but just play him. Absolutely play him.
Yeah,
you make the case for Diggs as well. I think Diggs 8,400. Just play him. play him at this stage. He was a bit disappointing against Baltimore, but he's so capable of a massive score.
Yeah, and I think they're going to get 40. They're going to get 40 points against Pittsburgh as well, I think so. And there's that sort of old-timey DFS sort of myth as it is now that these teams, once they go ahead, they just run the ball, but the NFL doesn't really work like that anymore. These teams keep on scoring and stuff, and
we mentioned about Brady being cheap earlier. The stack that you can actually put together if you're going to go with a Brady start quarterback. Mike Evans 6,900 this week is a tasty price. Chris Godwin, if he is good to go, 5,900 in his return game. Last week, he 10 targets, 7 receptions. He's a favourite of Brady as well when he's healthy. Julio Jones doesn't really look like Julio Jones of old anymore. And then it sort of bit part plays throughout the rest of the receiver core, I think. So I think, again, with confidence, you can play either of those two or both if you're going to stack with Brady. I think it's a cheap stack considering the talent you're getting from it, but it's likely to be highly owned for that reason.
Would you, if you were playing a stack of Brady, Evans, and Godwin, would you use an Atlanta bring back? Is there an obvious one?
Yeah, I think I would. Yeah, I think I would, and I'd probably be paying. Kyle Pitts just isn't doing it this year, is he? I think I'd have to throw in Drake London at 5'9". Yeah, I'd have to. The targets are there. I'd have to throw him in. The running back picture is really murky there. Algier should be getting more carries this week, but then Caleb Huntley's there, who got some carries last week when Patterson went down. So the only obvious player there, I think, for Atlanta is Drake London, and I suspect they're going to have to throw the ball against Tampa Bay.
Yeah, but I think this is an example of one of those cases where I feel like you're forcing Drake London in that stack, and do you really need to? Do you really need to?
Yeah.
I don't know that you do. But yeah, I do feel it's a bit forced because of the lack of. If Cordell Patterson was playing, he'd be an easy, obvious, bring back. But let's say Pitts is down at the moment for whatever reason, and their passing game hasn't. I mean, admittedly, last week was a bit. You can't really judge it on last week, their passing game, because basically they were getting, like, in the second half, they were getting like 10 yards per carry or something. So they're just running against Cleveland.
Yeah.
So, interesting. But yeah, the Brady stack looks good. It looks good value this week. If you do the Brady stack, though, I think you need to be different elsewhere, because I think it's going to be fairly popular.
I think there are cheaper tight ends that I'd prefer to go for than Pitts, but I know he's not started the season well, but if you were going to throw in a bring back, then I think Drake London's the more obvious pick of the two. Pitts at 4,400 could present good value if you get 80% of the Kyle Pitts that we got last year. Yeah, I think, like you said, though, it feels forced. It feels like you're just throwing that one in there. I don't think you have to have a bring back player there, and that's a prime example of the reasons why.
Yeah, it's just another example of those. You can play DFS in any way you want to. There's lots of stuff. People tell you need to have bring backs in these stacks, these 2+1s or 3+1s and stuff. But if you feel forced, just don't do it. It's your lineup. And if you want to bring back in, put it in as well. It's still your lineup. It's up to you. Should we move on to the tight ends now? Then, as you brought them up.
I just position. Yeah, did we cover that off? George said Gallup high ownership if Lamb is out. Suspect that he will be, but 2 words: Noah Brown.
Yeah, he's the value if. He's off. He has a queue next to him. He's a full participant on Wednesday. Okay, fine. Yeah, I think you could have a fairly decent stack if Lamb's not playing, but if you really want to, I'm just. This again. This is another one of those offenses where it's not obvious who you play because you got running backs which are splitting fantasy points. Other than CeeDee Lamb, it's all getting spread about a bit. Tight end is. I don't really get who you do play from this team. Who's going to get you 25 points to win a mini maker or something? You know.
Yeah, and I've lack of confidence in Cooper Rush at quarterback. If I'm honest, I know they've eked a couple of wins out in recent weeks, but I don't think he's the answer against some of the more premium teams in the league. And me personally, bias wise, I am hoping for a bit of a Rams revenge game this week. Yeah, tight ends, Matt. Let's move on to our favourite position.
Yeah. Let me check out what Jordan's notes. He was going to talk about Higbee, which kind of seems obvious as to why.
Obvious play at this stage, yeah.
Yes, exactly. He's his targets amount of targets is crazy at the moment. Let me just check it on my spreadsheet. To see where he compares to others. Yeah,
38 targets.
Even with the wide receivers, he's like 8th. If you include him with the wide receivers in number of targets. And I think he's the best value play on DK if you look at targets to their price. Yeah, he is.
The only thing he's lacking this year so far is the touchdowns. Everything else is there for him.
Yeah. And he could easily get 2 in a game. But suddenly, his like 17 last week turns into 31 and stuff. So he's a good player. He's going to be popular though, I think, because of it. Also, he's in the late game, so it gives you a lot of you can scope to change your lineup if you need to. So I was actually going to talk about Hawkinson, Nick. In our notes, I've written I'm going to be sick. Yeah.
Oh dear me.
For the main reason being, is if Amon Ross Brown is out again and Swift is out again, DJ Chark could well be back, but that's kind of the only game scenario where he's going to do well, if you see what I mean. When they're back, he's going to be back to his 10, 5, and 7 points, as it were. So assuming they're still out, who else do they have really? And New England is New England are 5th in points, fantasy points given up against tight end as well. So yeah, I think he's also 4th in targets amongst tight ends. So yeah, my views on him. Generally, I think he's overrated for fantasy and stuff. But assuming these players are still out now, Chark coming back, I don't know how much that'll impact on him. But you don't need him to get 42 points every week for him to be a good play. Not by any stretch. So there you go. Actually talking about Hawkinson.
I am stunned almost into silence on that.
It's
it did make me laugh that you wrote on your notes, though, I'm going to be sick. Because I know your thoughts on TJ Hawkinson.
Yeah.
Also, just look at his picture on DraftKings. I don't know if TJ Hawkinson and the WWF/WWE superstar Edge might be the same person. They look very similar. At the tight end, it's a position I've been paying down at for a few weeks, and I keep going back to Tyler Conklin. He is seeing a good number of targets every week. If I'm seeing a tight end getting 5 to 10 targets a week, I'm quite happy with that. And it's consistent targets as well. Another 5 targets last week, 3 receptions. That's with Zach Wilson under center. But he's nice and cheap. The matchup's good this week against Miami. Nearly 300 yards given up to tight ends already and 2 touchdowns on the season, which ranks them, I think, 5th or 6th worst against tight ends. So again, it's another good matchup there. And if it is going to be a high scorer, I like Conklin at that price, 3-7 versus some of the Jets receivers. I think he's got just as much chance of finding his way into the end zone as some of the likes of Elijah Moore, Corey Davis. So I think the work is there.
I was telling you Higbee was the highest value for targets per DraftKings million. Well, Conklin's second. So because his price just isn't really going up. And this is definitely the show where we've talked about the Jets the most as viable fantasy options, Nick. I think in all the time we've been doing this.
I didn't even know the Jets existed until this season. I mean, we've never spoken about the Jets. Never ever spoken about the Jets. And how many times in one night? This lineup could be Jets. We could end up with a Jets QB, running back, wide receiver, and tight end at this rate.
Yeah, and then a bunch of injured bringbacks, like Hill and Waddle. I think tight end generally has been pretty, especially as you haven't got the best tight ends on there today. Zach Ertz has been pretty decent. Does Goddard's okay? Yeah. Everett's looked pretty decent as well. Freiermuth has had a load of targets.
And Njoku has as well, to be fair, in recent weeks.
Yeah, he's got another Q neck. Oh, he's a full participant. Okay, he's back then. So I think there's actually lots of options, but none of them are particularly. I mean, again, I'm probably gonna have to shower after the show for saying this, but Hockenson might have the highest ceiling here in terms of the tight ends, and everybody else is, I think it's one of those. If you want to pay down, that's great. You can pay down. Will Disley is a touchdown machine at the moment, for example, but you've got to get value out of spending that money elsewhere. That's kind of really the lesson from paying down here, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree with Hockenson. I think, to see Kittle at 5'2", I know the pedigree is there, and we've seen it from him, but as it stands at the moment, we're not seeing it from him. And I feel like we've not seen it from Kittle for a while consistently.
Yeah.
I think there's a much higher ceiling for Hockenson this week than Kittle, so I like that play, and I don't think there's all that much else that we need to say about tight ends really this week.
No. Do you want to talk even less about defenses?
Let's talk even less about defenses.
Yeah. Browns is who Jordan was going to talk about. The Browns.
I mean, they're relatively cheap at 2.7. There's upside there with the Browns D. I get that. I quite like the Seahawks. I especially like the Seahawks if
the
little ginger rocket is back at quarterback again this week. That said, James Winston is nothing to write home about most weeks. But yeah, Seahawks, I think 2-5, sneaky good defense. Any Pete Carroll defense is always going to be fairly productive and keep them in games. At the low end, I mentioned the Texans D earlier. I think the Texans D has got a little bit of something to it.
I quite like the Cowboys down here, really, just because
Cowboys
Stafford continues to be an interception machine.
I
also think, funnily enough, because Cooper Kupp is so productive, I think you could actually play Kupp and Cowboys in the same lineup in GPPs.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Panthers aren't a bad play either because there's very similar reasons. I think Jimmy Garoppolo had the better of the two games this week, but minus the big play from Deebo Samuel, he didn't do a great deal to win the game himself. The game wasn't on his shoulders. He's a typical game manager quarterback, but we've seen the fumbles, we've seen the turnovers from him, even this year. So I think the Panthers there might not be a bad play. A decent scoring defense in the last couple of weeks as well. I don't, if you've got the budget left over, you could pay up at the position. I guess the Bucs would be the obvious one, Mark. Maybe the Vikings. Justin Fields doesn't really throw the ball, does he? So,
yeah, I think if you want to if you say a small entry, I would just definitely put the Bills in small field tournaments. Just put the Bills in starting lineup from there, because I think they're a good defense. Pittsburgh can definitely give you some points, etc., and you're automatically going to be a little bit different to everybody else because people are trying to pay down a little bit down here, probably around the 3s or something like that. So, I think so. Great.
One lineup, Mark, and then we'll call it a night.
What should we do? A GPP lineup?
Why not?
Okay, so you wanted to pay down for quarterback, didn't you?
Yeah,
Now it seems hard. Now you've got to actually put it in the lineup.
Yeah.
Now
I'm actually looking at them.
Yeah.
Now I'm actually looking at them. I mean, we could end up with Trevor Siemian at quarterback at this rate.
Should you put Jordan's Trevor Lawrence and Kirk? Should you put Jordan's Trevor Lawrence and Christian Kirk stack in for him as he can't be here?
Yeah. Throw them in. Trevor Lawrence, Christian Kirk. Let's start the lineup off.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it like that. And are we going to bring it back? It's got to be Damian Pierce is about the best option, isn't he?
Yeah, I don't mind Pierce in there at his price this week. I think he's shown enough over the past couple of weeks as well. I think Rex Burkhead's a thing of the past there.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's all we need from that game, though, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think tight end. We both like Hawk, so we'll throw Hawkins in.
Yeah. Oh, do you want to put in Ramondre Stevenson as a potential mini stack for that one? Yeah.
Yeah, throw him in.
It's just very balanced at the moment, Nick. Very balanced.
This is what I like.
Should you just go down and quickly put in a defense? Maybe your Seahawks or something. 2-5. Just because I do really like that shot. That price. There you go. Now we know what we've got to spend.
Yeah. So I think your Garrett Wilson shout, I think, is a good one at 5-2.
Yeah, let's put him in.
And I am still on the Amari Cooper train this week.
Yeah,
I want to put him forward, which leaves us with quite a decent amount of budget. Now, bear in mind, we don't have to spend all this.
You could have a Dalvin Cook though. You could have a Dalvin Cook.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. I'm gravitating towards Dalvin Cook at 7-3.
Yeah. Me too. Marquise Brown is he's returned to practice. That's good. He's getting a lot of targets this year. Finally shown his potential. He didn't get in.
As is Mike Williams actually. I don't know if Keenan Allen's going to be back this week or not. He didn't participate in practice Wednesday, which. Yeah. So Mike Williams might not be a bad player there as well.
He gives us the small mini stack as well with Cooper.
Yeah.
So got 400 left.
Money on the table. So there you go. I mean, it doesn't need to be spent. Yeah, that was one of the things we said tonight. Yeah.
That's actually a pretty decent lineup. I'm quite happy with that. If you could have a Jack's, Trevor Lawrence quarterback. So yeah, great.
There we go. Well, Mark, I think this is probably a record for us. This feels like one of our longest, but I think
it is our longest.
It's been an absolute blast.
It's gone really quickly.
I assume nothing further to add from yourself this evening.
No, I think I've talked quite enough.
Cool. As have I. So on that nice finish, As always, catches for sure, touchdowns for dough. And we will see you next Thursday.